The final boarding announcement crackled through Terminal C as James Matthews gripped his boarding pass, exhaustion settling into his navy blazer like a second skin. 3 desperate days of pitching his educational app to indifferent investors, and all he wanted was Sophie's bedtime routine and his own pillow. That's when he heard it. His name, shouted with such raw intensity that every head in the gate area swiveled toward the sound. Eliza Montgomery stood 15 feet away, breathless and stunning in a crimson dress that commanded attention even as she gasped for air. The CEO of Montgomery Innovations, the woman who delivered the conference's opening keynote to 2,000 people without a tremor in her voice, now looked completely undone. "James, wait." Her voice cracked on his name. "Don't fly home yet. I want you tonight." If this story is pulling at your heartstrings, smash that subscribe button right now. We're just getting started, and you won't want to miss what happens next. James froze, his boarding pass trembling between white-knuckled fingers. 72 hours ago, he'd been invisible, just another single father with a dream too big and a bank account too small. Now one of Tech's most powerful women was publicly begging him to stay, with a terminal full of strangers watching their private moment become a spectacle. But the real question wasn't about missing a flight. It was whether he could risk dismantling the emotional fortress he'd built around himself since the day he became both mother and father to a 6-year-old girl with special needs. The gate agent's hand moved toward the door controls. "Sir, last call for boarding." James's phone felt heavy in his pocket, where Sophie's goodnight call was scheduled for exactly 23 minutes from now, the sacred ritual that anchored both their worlds. Drop a comment below and tell us what country you're watching from. Will James choose safety or the chance at something extraordinary? Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this emotional journey. 3 days earlier, James had been on his knees in the hotel conference center, fighting with a banner that had collapsed for the 3rd time. His hands shook as he tried to reconnect the aluminum poles, acutely aware that the showcase floor would open in 20 minutes, and his booth looked like a disaster zone. The professional displays surrounding him, sleek digital screens and custom lighting rigs, only amplified his inadequacy. This conference had cost him everything: his last credit card with available limit, Mrs. Chen's discounted childcare rate, and Sophie's understanding when he'd explained Daddy needed to miss her school science fair. If he couldn't even assemble a basic banner, what was he doing here? "That model has a design flaw." The voice came from above him, confident and precise. "The locking mechanism jams unless you force it slightly left." James looked up to find a woman in an immaculate charcoal suit already setting down her leather portfolio. Recognition hit him like cold water. Eliza Montgomery, whose keynote photo had been plastered across every conference banner. She was already reaching for his fallen banner before he could form a coherent response. "I've got it, really," he started, scrambling to his feet. "You've got 8 minutes now," she corrected, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "And I know exactly how these work." Within 2 minutes, she'd accomplished what 30 minutes of his frustrated attempts couldn't. As she locked the final pole into place, her eyes drifted to his prototype tablet, displaying the app interface. Educational technology, she observed, genuine curiosity replacing her executive efficiency. "Tell me about it." James glanced at the clock, then at this impossibly polished woman who'd just rescued his disaster of setup. "My daughter couldn't read the way her school wanted her to," he began. "So I built something different." Something shifted in Eliza's expression, the professional mask softening into something almost vulnerable. "Different how?" James found himself talking faster than he'd planned, the rehearsed pitch dissolving into raw truth. "Sophie has ADHD and dyslexia. Every reading program we tried felt like punishment to her. Timed exercises, red X marks when she got things wrong, progress bars that never seemed to move. She started having panic attacks before homework time." He pulled up the app's interface, his exhaustion temporarily forgotten. "So I built this. It adapts to however her brain works that particular day. If she's struggling with letter recognition, it shifts to audio cues. If she's hyper-focusing, it challenges her harder. And it never, ever marks anything wrong. It just offers different pathways to the same destination. Eliza leaned closer to the screen, her finger tracing the colorful interface. My younger brother had similar challenges, she said quietly. This would have changed everything for him. Your keynote starts in 4 minutes, James reminded her, suddenly aware he'd been monopolizing a CEO's time. She straightened, but her eyes remained thoughtful. Your demo's at 2? If anyone stops by, they will. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a business card, then grabbed his pen and wrote something on the back. This is my personal cell. Call me after your showcase. I want to hear how it goes, and I have some thoughts on your market positioning. James stared at the numbers scrawled in her precise handwriting, certain he'd misunderstood. You want me to call you? Unless you'd rather not get funding, she said, the hint of a smile playing at her lips. Then she was gone, leaving James holding a business card that felt like it might combust in his trembling hands. James had called that evening, expecting a 5-minute conversation about investor contacts. Instead, Eliza suggested coffee in the hotel lobby, which became dinner when the coffee shop closed, which stretched until the restaurant staff began stacking chairs around them at midnight. Tell me about Sophie, Eliza had said, and James found himself sharing stories he usually kept locked away. How Sophie arranged her stuffed animals by emotional needs rather than size. How she'd sob for an hour when her teacher used a red pen on her spelling test. How she'd asked him last month if Mommy would be proud of who they'd become. Eliza listened with an intensity that felt like being truly seen for the first time in 3 years. When it was her turn, she talked about the brother who'd struggled through school, about building her company as armor against vulnerability, about the empty penthouse that echoed with everything she'd sacrificed for success. The second day, she'd introduced him to investors with a casual authority that transformed his struggling pitch into something viable. That night, they'd abandoned the hotel restaurant for a quiet bar where the conversation shifted from business to the spaces between. The loneliness of single parenting, the isolation of leadership, the fear that maybe they'd both optimize their lives for everything except actual happiness. By the third morning, James caught himself checking his phone not for Sophie updates, but for Eliza's messages. They'd stolen an hour between her panel and his meeting, walking through the hotel gardens while she explained her 5-year plan, and he realized none of his own plans had included space for this. For someone who asked about his dreams like they mattered as much as his daughter's needs. I don't want this to end tomorrow, she'd admitted as they stood by the fountain, her usual composure cracking just enough to reveal the truth underneath. Neither did he. That was the terrifying part. Now, standing at the gate with Eliza's desperate plea hanging in the air between them, James felt the weight of every safe choice he'd made since Lisa's death pressing against his chest. The gate agent's hand hovered over the door controls, her expression a mix of impatience and reluctant fascination with the drama unfolding before her. My daughter, James started, his voice rough. She's expecting my call in 20 minutes. She has a routine. I know, Eliza interrupted, stepping closer despite the audience of strangers recording them with phones. I'm not asking you to choose between Sophie and me. I would never ask that. I'm just asking for tonight. A few more hours to figure out if what we found this weekend is real or just conference magic that disappears the moment we return to our actual lives. James's thumb hovered over his phone screen. Mrs. Chen's contact already pulled up. One call could extend his absence. One call could crack open the careful boundaries he'd maintained. One call could risk everything. Sir, I need your decision now, the gate agent said, though her tone had softened. He pressed dial. Mrs. Chun answered on the second ring, and James could hear Sophie's laughter in the background, already deep into whatever game his neighbor had invented. He explained the situation in careful terms, a potential investor, an unexpected opportunity, just one more night. James Matthews, you listen to me. Mrs. Chen's voice carried the weight of her 70 years and 5 decades of marriage. That little girl will be fine. You go figure out if this woman makes you smile the way you're smiling right now while talking about her. His finger trembled as he ended the call and met Eliza's eyes. One night, he said, but I video call Sophie first. The relief that flooded Eliza's face was worth every risk. 2 weeks later, Eliza's town car pulled up to James's Portland bungalow, and he watched through the window as she sat motionless for a full minute, staring at the modest craftsman house with its peeling blue paint and overgrown garden. When she finally emerged, she was wearing jeans, actual jeans, and a casual sweater that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage, but at least wasn't a power suit. "It's smaller than I expected," she said, then immediately winced. "That came out wrong. It's smaller than your hotel suite was," James corrected with a slight smile. "Come on." Sophie's been rearranging her stuffed animals for an hour in preparation. Inside, the house told the story of their life in ways James suddenly saw through Eliza's eyes. Sophie's artwork covering every wall, the dining table doubled as his workspace, the living room dominated by educational materials and therapy tools rather than furniture that matched. It was cluttered and lived in and nothing like the sleek minimalism of Eliza's world. Sophie appeared in the hallway, half hidden behind the doorframe, her fingers twisting the hem of her favorite unicorn shirt. James had spent the morning explaining that Ms. Montgomery was Daddy's friend, that she was visiting from far away, that she knew about Sophie's special brain and thought it was wonderful. Eliza crouched down to Sophie's eye level, her designer jeans creasing against the scuffed hardwood. "Your dad told me you're the chief testing officer for his app. That's a pretty important job." Sophie's eyes widened. "Do you know what a chief testing officer does?" "Someone who finds all the problems before anyone else can," Eliza said seriously. "The most important person in any company." Something in Sophie's posture relaxed. She stepped fully into the hallway, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. "Do you want to meet Mr. Snuggles? He has anxiety." Eliza spent the next hour seated cross-legged on Sophie's bedroom floor, her sweater collecting dust bunnies as she listened with complete attention to the elaborate emotional needs of 17 stuffed animals. Mr. Snuggles had separation anxiety. Princess Fluffington struggled with anger management. The dinosaur whose name James could never remember had ADHD, just like Sophie. "So when Princess Fluffington gets mad, what helps her calm down?" Eliza asked, holding the bedraggled pink unicorn with the same careful respect she'd shown James's prototype. "She counts her breaths," Sophie explained, demonstrating with exaggerated inhales. "4 in, 4 out. My therapist taught me." "Do you get mad sometimes?" "More than I should," Eliza admitted. "Usually in board meetings when people aren't listening." Sophie nodded sagely. "Daddy gets mad when the code doesn't work. But he doesn't yell. He just makes this face." She scrunched up her features in an eerily accurate imitation that made Eliza laugh, a genuine, unguarded sound James had only heard a handful of times. After lunch, Sophie insisted on showing Eliza her rock collection, dragging her to the backyard where months of geological treasures lay organized by color, size, and specialness. Eliza examined each one with scientific interest, asking questions about where Sophie found them and why certain rocks felt more important than others. "This one's my favorite," Sophie said, holding up a plain gray stone. "I found it the day after Mommy died. Daddy said maybe Mommy sent it to remind me she's still watching." The air shifted, heavy with the weight of grief James thought he'd hidden better. But Eliza didn't flinch or offer empty platitudes. She simply held the rock with reverence and said, "Then it's definitely the most special one here." Sophie beamed and placed it carefully back in its honored position. The first month of long distance was romantic in its intensity. Late-night video calls where they talked until dawn crept through their respective windows, care packages containing Sophie's artwork and Eliza's favorite coffee beans, text messages that arrived at perfectly timed moments of struggle. By month 3, reality had sharpened its edges. Eliza missed their scheduled call because a board meeting ran late. James canceled weekend plans when Sophie had a meltdown that lasted 6 hours. Time zones that had seemed manageable became weaponized. Her breakfast was his midnight. Her crisis meetings collided with his pickup time at Sophie's school. "I'm sorry," became the refrain of their relationship, whispered through screens that couldn't bridge 3,000 miles of continental divide. James watched Eliza's face pixelate during a video call, her exhaustion evident even through the unstable connection. Behind her, floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Boston's glittering skyline, a reminder of the gulf between her world and his. The Tokyo investors want to meet next week, she was saying. I'll be gone for 10 days. 10 days. He'd gone 3 days without hearing her voice last month, and it felt like drowning. We can't keep doing this, he said quietly, and watched her freeze on screen. What are you saying? I'm saying Sophie asked me yesterday why my happy friend doesn't visit anymore. I'm saying I fell asleep during her bedtime story because I was up until 2 a.m. waiting for your flight to land. I'm saying maybe we were just fooling ourselves at that conference. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything they'd hoped for and the brutal mathematics of their impossible lives. Don't, Eliza finally whispered. Please don't give up yet. But James wasn't sure either of them had enough left to hold on. Want to see how this beautiful love story ends? Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an emotional moment. Drop a comment telling us which country you're watching from. We love hearing from our global family. The call came during James's morning client meeting, Sophie's school, the principal's carefully neutral voice explaining that Sophie had experienced a significant emotional episode during her reading assessment. She was safe, but could he please come get her? James was halfway to his car when his phone buzzed with Eliza's name. He almost didn't answer. They'd barely spoken in the week since their last strained video call, but muscle memory won out. I can't talk right now, he said without preamble. Sophie's having a crisis at school. What happened? Failed reading test, public meltdown, the usual nightmare. His voice cracked despite his attempt at control. I have to go. I'm coming. Eliza, you're in Boston. I'm actually in San Francisco. Investor meeting. He heard movement, voices in the background. There's a flight in 90 minutes. I can be there by 3. You can't just leave a meeting. Watch me. She hung up before he could argue further. James found Sophie in the principal's office, curled into herself on the worn couch, her face blotchy and swollen. She launched herself at him the moment he entered, and he held her while she sobbed about how the words wouldn't stay still, how everyone was staring, how maybe her brain was just broken forever. He was still holding her 5 hours later when his doorbell rang. Sophie had finally calmed enough to build an elaborate fortress of couch cushions, declaring it a no-failure zone where mistakes weren't allowed to enter. Eliza stood on his porch in a business suit with her laptop bag still over her shoulder, her hair disheveled from travel. She looked completely out of place and absolutely perfect. I got here as fast as I could, she said simply. Sophie's voice came from inside the cushion fort. Is that the happy friend? 3 months after Eliza abandoned her San Francisco meeting, James found her sitting on his porch steps at 7 in the morning, 2 coffees beside her, and an expression he couldn't quite read. You're not supposed to be here until Thursday, he said, his heart doing that painful lurch it still did whenever she appeared unexpectedly. I bought a building, she announced. Downtown Portland. 20,000 square feet. James sat down beside her, coffee forgotten. You what? Montgomery Innovations is relocating its headquarters. We're keeping the Boston office for East Coast operations, but primary development and executive leadership will be here by January. She turned to face him fully. I'm moving here, James. Permanently. Eliza, you can't uproot your entire company. I did. The board voted unanimously yesterday. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly around her coffee cup. I've spent 6 months trying to make this work from 3,000 miles away, missing Sophie's good days and your hard nights, living on video calls and hope. I'm done with distance. I'm done with almosts. What if this doesn't work? The fear he'd carried for months finally found words. What if you give up everything and we're still just 2 people who can't quite figure out how to fit together? She reached for his hand. Then at least I'll have tried. At least I'll have shown up. Her eyes held his with an intensity that felt like a promise. Your daughter taught me something with those stuffed animals, that the most important thing isn't being perfect, it's being present. So I'm choosing present, James. I'm choosing here. From inside the house, Sophie's voice called out, Daddy, is Eliza here? I made her a welcome home card. Eliza smiled, tears catching the morning light. I'm already home. That's the end of our story. If these heartfelt moments touched you, please subscribe and drop a comment telling us what country you're watching from. We love hearing from our global community. Your support means everything, And we have so many more stories of unexpected love and transformation coming your way.